there's a lot of talk about this right now because clearly the candidate is saying things that don't match up and are inconsistent, and it becomes very difficult to pin him down. And indeed, he has said at times that that's one technique that he thinks is important to use, which is not give people a sense of what you intend to do, to surprise people. And he certainly does surprise people. But the problem is that can lead to all sorts of different confusing situations and very hard times with allies who would like to know where you stand, and with voters who would like to know what they are in fact voting for. And I don't know that anyone who supports him can actually say what's going on here. So let's see what else we have on this. This again from the Washington Post. It says, it sure sounds like Donald Trump is considering his biggest flip-flop yet. So I'll just read the Post. Donald Trump launches his campaign on a promise to be very, very tough on illegal immigration and immigrants. He called Mexican immigrants racists and criminals, and he would later promise to deport every single one of them, even approvingly referencing a controversial 1950s mass deportation program known as Operation Wetback. He has in recent weeks prominently featured victims of crimes perpetrated by illegal immigrants. But according to reports and the suggestions of his top advisors on Sunday, it sounds as if he's considering seriously changing his tune and what would amount to a stunning flip-flop. Excuse me. Late Saturday, BuzzFeed and Univision reported that Trump backed away from that rhetoric at a meeting with a group of newly announced Hispanic advisors, appearing open to a plan to deal with the estimated 11 million illegal immigrants that is not deportation. Importantly, Trump did not explicitly use the word legalization at the meeting, but sources in the room said they feel it is the direction the campaign is going. Univision, meanwhile, reported that 3 attendees said Trump plans to present an immigration plan in Colorado Tuesday that will include finding a way to legalize millions of undocumented immigrants. Top Trump advisors were asked Sunday to respond to the reports, and they didn't exactly reject them. Asked twice whether he was sticking with his plan for a deportation force, newly installed Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway deflected and then told CNN that it was to be determined. Senator Jeff Sessions, meanwhile, said that Trump is wrestling with how to handle illegal immigrants already in the United States. Quote, what I'm certain about is that he did not make a firm commitment yesterday or the meeting the other day about what he will do with that, Sessions said on CBS News when asked whether Trump still supports deporting all 11 million. But he did listen, and he's talking about it. Interesting. Trump's campaign is playing down the reports and says nothing has really changed, but it clearly has. Even in equivocating and saying it's to be determined, the campaign is striking a far different tone than Trump has before. Conway was twice given the chance to reiterate that Trump will deport all illegal immigrants, and she didn't. Excuse me again. Losing my voice. And to be clear, that has been Trump's position. Anything else would present a major change from a guy whose primary victory and 2016 campaign writ large have been defined by his hardline immigration stance. It has been his, should be his, it actually has, that's the way it's written, but it should be, it has been his signature proposal, complete with a Mexico-funded border wall. In August 2015, when asked on NBC's Meet the Press whether he would deport all illegal immigrants, Trump repeatedly responded, they have to go. In September, he confirmed to 60 Minutes that was his position, saying they could apply for legalization after being deported. Question, you're rounding them all up? Answer, we're rounding them up in a very humane way, in a very nice way. So picture that briefly, editorial aside. Rounding people up for deportation in a very nice way. I suspect that people will knock on the door. Hello? I would like to offer you a chance to get on this bus to be deported. Leaving now. Yeah, we'll see about that. Anyway, so Trump says, quote, this is a quote, we're rounding them up in a very humane way, in a very nice way. And they're going to be happy because they want to be legalized. And by the way, I know it doesn't sound nice, but not everything is nice. So they're rounding them up in a very nice way, but not everything is nice. And it doesn't sound nice. So I don't even know what he just said there. Trump repeated his promise of a deportation force in November, even pointing to Operation Wetback, a large-scale removal of illegal immigrants under Dwight Eisenhower in 1954 that is seen as inhumane, though not by name. And Trump was crystal clear in a February debate. Quote, we have at least 11 million people in this country that came in illegally, he said. They will go out. They will come back. Some will come back, the best, through a process. They have to come back legally. But this weekend, though, is not the first time that Trump has signaled he might soften that position. In a February interview with the New York Times editorial board, Trump reportedly said that his plan was negotiable. He later denied that. In June, Trump said he would not describe his plan as mass deportation. That's because it's nice and it's humane. It's mass nice deportation, or something like that. We don't know what Trump will propose in the days and weeks ahead, but the fact that he's even thinking about it is notable because his existing plan was clear and unequivocal, presented over and over again. Trump's positions on the issues have changed before. He is not a model of consistency, to put it mildly. But this issue was so central to his previous appeals that a change in course would truly be striking, the kind of ultra-convenient general election pivot that he has previously avoided and said he wasn't interested in. So, as an update, Trump appeared on Fox News on Monday morning and said he is considering his immigration position, but that it isn't a flip-flop. Of course not. He said he wanted a very fair but firm answer. Quote, we have to be very, very strong when people come in illegally. We have a lot of people that want to come in through the legal process, and it's not fair for them. We're working with a lot of people in the Hispanic community to try and come up with an answer. No, I'm not flip-flopping. We want to come up with a really fair but firm answer. That it has to be very firm, but we want to come up with something fair. So, to be continued. We will see what he says. But clearly, feeling some pressure here, I would say. Definitely feeling some pressure to soften that stance because, frankly, the whole idea, the whole prospect is untenable from the top to the bottom. The wall is ridiculous. It is absurd conception. It will never happen. It cannot ever happen. There's no physical way of doing this. There's no possible reason to do it. It would be a ridiculous thing. And everyone knows it except the people who like it as some sort of sign of toughness on immigration, or I don't know what. Some sort of repudiation of everybody south of the border and saying, you people are not wanted and we're going to put this wall here to make that so very clear that you know when you start heading this way that you are not wanted here. That's what the wall is all about, and that's what it says. So I don't know. So here we go. Here's something else on that same thing, and it may repeat. These articles tend to repeat the same kind of information, but there's always something new in there. So this is from Slate. Entitled, Is Trump Getting Ready to Abandon Plans for Deportation Force? Sure sounds like it. So Donald Trump's plans for a deportation force to round up the approximately 11 million undocumented immigrants in the country always seemed far-fetched. Now it looks like the candidate may be starting to walk away from it, while also hinting he could be open to legalizing at least some of those who are in the country without the proper papers. Trump's new campaign manager, blah, blah, we already heard this, CNN interview, to be determined, etc. In an effort to clarify Trump's immigration stance, Conway avoided getting into too many specifics about what the candidate's plan would be if he reaches the White House. So she attempted to clarify by avoiding specifics. Yeah, that makes things very clear. Quote, what he supports is to make sure we enforce the law, that we are respectful of those Americans who are looking for jobs, and that we are fair and humane to those who live among us. That's the nice rounding up and deportation we were talking about earlier, the fair and humane. It's a humane, nice deportation. Conway was repeatedly asked about immigration after both Univision and BuzzFeed reported that Trump sounded like someone who could be open to legalize some of the immigrants. Quote, he said people who are here is the toughest part of the immigration debate, that it must be something that respects border security but deals with this in a humane and efficient manner. So, Univision says Trump will be presenting an immigration plan on Thursday that will include finding a way to legalize millions of undocumented immigrants, even though Trump never actually uttered the word legalization during the meeting. Sources in the room said they feel it is the direction the campaign is going. Okay, so I have to stop here. This is part of Trump's shtick, and I'm amazed that anybody falls for it at any point. He speaks so vaguely and in such a circuitous way that he gives you impressions. He doesn't say very much specifically, ever. Ever. He almost never says anything specifically. It's always kind of around, and he implies and hints. He says other people are saying this, and he reacts to what other people are saying, and then later says, well, I never said that. People were saying it. I was reacting to people saying it. He's the one bringing it up. He's the one placing it on the table. He is the one that is pointing to this thing and saying, look at this thing. I will react to this thing, but I can deny it later because it wasn't me saying it. It was someone else. Someone unnamed was saying it. So he's doing the same thing with immigration. He has said very clearly what he wants to do, what he intends to do, what he expects to do. And then now he's saying stuff that implies other things in the hopes that people will do exactly what these guys here did. Exactly. Univision says Trump will be presenting an immigration plan on Thursday that will include finding a way to legalize millions of undocumented immigrants. Why do they say that? Because they feel it is the direction the campaign is going, even though he didn't actually say that. Here is this is his art of the deal, if you want to understand him. He makes you feel like he is saying things to you that you want to hear, but he doesn't actually say them, can't be held to them, and will not honor them later if he chooses not to. So we should be very clear about that. Even though people are saying they think that's what he's doing, he hasn't actually said that. Till he actually says that, we have to assume the things he has actually said are still the things he means. And I wish more news persons would keep that stuff in mind. So, the Trump campaign, to continue the story, immediately disputed that characterization of the talk, adding that the candidate didn't say anything at the meeting that he hasn't said many times before. An RNC official said that Trump gave zero indication that he was open to legalization of undocumented immigrants. So, Trump is now saying two things, two completely different things, partially by not saying them, by hinting at them and not saying them. And he's hoping, apparently, I mean, all I can read from this is that he's hoping that different people will hear different things and will believe different things, and that he can get by without actually committing to anything. And if that is the kind of president you want, go for it, but I really hope you're smarter than that. Okay, so to continue again with the story, although he has repeatedly called for deporting the country's undocumented immigrants, Trump also told Bloomberg News in June that he would not say mass deportations are part of his immigration plan. Quote, we are going to get rid of a lot of bad dudes who are here, end quote. So essentially what he's committing to there, or what he is actually saying, is he's going to continue the same things as Secure Communities did and as the new priority enforcement does, which is basically if people with criminal records are prioritized for deportation and not anybody else. So that sounds like he's changing it again, because earlier he was saying everybody's got to go. So, this talk of a possible shift in Trump's immigration plan comes mere days after the candidate released his first national election television ad that focused on the importance of border security. Quote, "Terrorists and dangerous criminals kept out. The border secure, our families safe," the narrator of the ad says. So, when people were talking about a general election pivot, they were surprised when Trump didn't do that. And that's what candidates usually do. They kind of go, okay, I'm going to make these hardline statements, and I'm going to soften them a little bit for mass consumption because I know they sound too harsh for most people's ears. So Trump didn't seem to be doing that, but he is actually doing that. He just doesn't seem to be doing that because he's instead just all over the place saying all sorts of different things, and it is completely unclear what he means. And so people are gifting him with what they think he means or what they think he's saying. And then he has surrogates walking around who will say different things to different people, and all he has to do is say, well, I didn't say that. That was somebody else. So this is really important. In terms of immigration, it's really important that we keep, to borrow a sports metaphor here, we keep our eye on the ball. What the ball is doing is we have Clinton on one side, who has stated clearly and unambiguously, without ever changing that she intends to continue Obama's policies and push even further for immigration reform and legalization and all those things. We have Trump saying everybody's got to go, build a wall, mass deportations. The fact that he is implying other things and kind of dancing around the topic now, that's his version of a pivot. And it's important to not allow that to get in the way of clearly understanding where the candidates stand and where what their supporters expect them to do. Because just because a candidate wants to do something doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do it if they have no support for doing it. So if elected with enough of a majority, we have what constitutes, I suppose, or what basically implies a mandate from the voters to do the thing they said they were going to do. So what Trump seems to be doing right now is obfuscating his message to the point where if he's elected, he can say, well, I've said all along X, because he never really said Y or Z. And even if a lot of people voted for him because they thought he was implying Y or Z, he still only said X. And that's what he says he can claim he has a mandate to do. George W. Bush did that on all sorts of subjects. As you will remember, he wasn't so much elected as selected when he was first came into office. So the Supreme Court sort of just nudged things in his direction, and that's how he won. But he immediately went about claiming a mandate on that, based on that fact, and doing all sorts of things that anyone with a good memory of such things now bitterly regrets his being able to do. Starting wars, making disastrous tax cuts, doing all sorts of things that just really created havoc and led to huge problems in this country. But that's what people will do, and that is what Trump will do. If elected, he will claim, I had a mandate for doing this, and then he has now been so vague and all over the place that he will do whatever he wants to do, whatever he can get away with, and there won't be a lot that we can do about it. So bear that in mind, and with that thought in mind, I just wanted to read something briefly about what Mrs. Clinton has been saying, by way of contrast. So Clinton says almost 500,000 immigrants still eligible for DACA, particularly Asian. Oh, how nice. So Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton has presented herself as an advocate for immigrants, saying she'll push for immigration reform within her first 100 days in the Oval Office and promising to continue the deferred deportation plans of President Barack Obama. So pretty clear, unambiguous. On August 15th, 4 years to the day since immigration officials began accepting deferred action for childhood arrivals applications, or DACA, she published a post on Medium directed to those who have applied for the deportation relief program and to those who haven't. Quote, "In America, the place of your birth should never be a barrier that stops you from reaching your God-given potential. That's what makes our country great, and that's the promise I'm going to fight to fulfill." End quote. She said a sizable amount of immigrants could still apply for the program. Quote, "Experts estimate almost 500,000 people are still eligible, particularly in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community." End quote. We wondered if Clinton was right about the estimated number of eligible applicants and whether the Asian and Pacific Islander communities represented an outsized proportion. Clinton's campaign directed us to an August report published by the Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute analyzing DACA application rates. The study found that the application rates were generally very low for immigrants born in Asia. The Homeland Security Department, which oversees immigration enforcement, announced DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, in June 2012. It was designed to defer deportation for undocumented immigrants 30 years old or younger and who arrived in the United States before they were 16 years old. And let me do a break here and remind the listeners that DACA was basically just another way of putting the DREAM Act into place. If you will remember, the DREAM Act, way back when, was designed to do exactly what DACA does, only as an official government policy, not as a temporary relief, but as a permanent relief. And it was voted down by Republicans who would not let it pass and would not vote for it. So DACA was the DREAM Act kind of repackaged as a presidential executive order and a temporary thing. So instead of a permanent relief for people born in the United States, brought here as children, DACA was a temporary, renewable relief for those people. Had we passed the DREAM Act, DACA would have been unnecessary. Had we passed comprehensive immigration reform, DACA, DAPA, and all of those things would have been unnecessary. So it just pays to remember what all these things are, because these are ways that we've tried and been trying to take care of people who deserve to be taken care of. These are not just arbitrary processes where someone says, "Oh, let's just make it okay for illegals to stay here because they might vote for us." This is, let's look at the conditions of actual people exist in and try to think what is fair and reasonable for them. That's what these programs are. Okay, so back to our story. Applicants have to meet several criteria to be considered, including having continuously lived in the United States since June 15th, 2007, and be in school, have graduated or obtained a GED certificate, or be honorably discharged veteran of the Coast Guard or U.S. Armed Forces. Applicants also cannot have felony convictions, a significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors, nor can they be a threat to national security or public safety. Advocates argue that those who were brought to the country by their parents as children should be given opportunities to stay in the country, since they likely weren't the ones making decisions to migrate or stay in the country illegally. DACA does not grant lawful status, but people who receive DACA are not considered to be unlawfully present during their time of deferred action. DACA defers deportation for 2-year periods. It can be renewed, and beneficiaries can also apply for work permits. This summer, the Supreme Court deadlocked in a 4-4 decision on an extended version of DACA and on a deferred action program for parents of U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, which allowed an appellate court's injunction to stand. That decision does not affect the original DACA. Back to Clinton's point, we wondered how many unauthorized immigrants are eligible and how many have applied. When it comes to the undocumented population, that's what's usually available are just estimates. The Migration Policy Institute report is based on a formula using federal immigration data and Census Bureau survey data. The report offers two sets of eligible applicants, 1.3 million and 1.7 million. The Institute found that about 1.3 million unauthorized immigrants were immediately eligible for DACA in 2016. They met all the criteria, including high school completion or school enrollment. About 400,000 more met DACA criteria except high school completion or school enrollment requirement in 2014. The additional 400,000 may have become eligible for DACA by enrolling in an adult education program, bringing the total eligible population in 2016 to about 1.7 million. And there's more to this story, but I don't have time to read it because I spent so much time talking about Trump and his wacky stuff. So anyway, I mainly with this program, I wanted to draw a comparison between the two candidates and what they're saying or not saying or implying or not implying. I didn't really get around. There was a lot more to read about Clinton, but basically it's not as interesting because it's very consistent throughout, and it is known what she intends to do and what she plans to do are known. They are continuations of a process that's been going on for 8 years now, and she wants to expand on that and do a better job of it, work harder on it, but basically it is the process that we know and love parts of and dislike other parts of. It's a known factor. Trump, on the other hand, unknown, pretty clear what he's been saying, pretty clear what he's been trying to avoid saying, and what he's implying. But I think it's pretty clear where he stands. And I just hope that people don't allow themselves to be confused, because the news reports seem to be trying, because he's so vague about what he says, reporters are often trying to fill in the gaps and kind of parse it and just say, well, he seems to be saying X. Well, seems to be and is are two different things. And it is important to bear in mind what he has actually said versus what he just sort of wanders around and implies and never really states. Because for immigrants, this is a vital election. It is one of the most important elections certainly in my lifetime. And it is important that we know and are aware and are very clear of what these choices are, because it could dramatically change your situation in the future. And I cannot stress that enough. So please be aware of it. Please pay attention. Read the news, but be very careful what you're reading, and go by what people are saying, not what they're implying. And on that note, I will have to let you go. Thank you for joining us in this internet-only edition of the show. Maybe someone came along and turned things back on, but I doubt it. It could be possible that we'll just go back to nothingness when I go off the air, but we'll see. In any event, thank you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.